Hello friends, it's been a while, hasn't it? First things first, yes, I did get a haircut. Also, please excuse my tea, but it's about 6 a.m. right now and I am not trying to fall asleep at work today. Today, we are going to be talking about driving in Japan. Since I am an American, I'm from the United States, most of this is going to be from the American perspective, talking to other Americans. Hopefully, if you're not American, this will still apply to you, but if not, sorry. So the first thing that you will need if you plan on driving in Japan is this, your IDP, or International Driving Permit. Getting one is really easy. You just have to walk into your local AAA, pay them like 20 bucks, give them a little picture of your face, and they will send you out with this. It lets you drive in something like 30 countries, and it has information in a bunch of different languages. I bookmarked the Japanese page, so it's easy to find if I ever get pulled over. The only issue that you will run into with an IDP is that the police in this country don't seem to know what to do with it because it's not a regular driver's license. That can have one of two outcomes that I've noticed. One, which is lucky, is that they're like, I have no idea what to do with this piece of paper. You were only speeding a little bit. Carry on. The other outcome, which has happened to more people that I've known personally, is that they say, I don't know what to do with this. Let's take 3 hours and figure it out as a family. So they might take forever to give you your tickets, or they'll like call you down to the station. If your Japanese isn't great, they'll like bring over the squad to try and translate things into English. Usually getting a ticket involves writing your address in kanji. Anyways, you'll need an IDP. It is valid for 1 year from whatever date they write on the front of this. In the US, when you get your IDP, you can tell them what date you want put on it. Like, I got this in late June, I think, of 2016, but the date on the front is July 27th, because that is the day that I knew that I would be coming to my like hometown. So I was like, oh god, what if I have to drive instantly? I didn't end up getting a car for like another 2 weeks, but that's beside the point. If you're in the US, you can choose your date. Just ask them to write something other than the date that it is that day. In some countries, I've heard that they have to write down the date that it is when you get the IDP, so in that case, you'll want to go as close to leaving as possible if you plan on being here for a year or more. When your full year is up and the IDP runs out, you'll have to go through the process of getting a Japanese driver's license, which is like a whole other thing. So there will be a separate video on that because I don't want this one to be 45 minutes long. So just know that that's coming, and don't fret. So, general driving in Japan. In case you're not aware, in Japan, people drive on the left side of the road. Driving on the left is a big source of stress for a lot of people who have never done this before, but to be quite honest, it's really not that bad. When you first start driving, it will feel very strange. However, your steering wheel is also on the other side of the car, so your body still is in like the center of the road. So after a while, it starts feeling normal again because your body is used to being on the side that's closer to the oncoming traffic, if that makes sense. The one thing that still gets me sometimes, and occasionally also gets my other right driving friends, is that the windshield wipers and the turn signals have switched sides. So the habit that you've formed over years of driving to just be like, I'm going to turn on my wipers, turn on my signal, are totally swapped. So every once in a while, if I'm just like on autopilot, I'll be like, oh, time to turn, and then switch the turn signal, and my windshield wipers are like, you're an idiot, you're an idiot. So that still happens, no shame. But that aside, it's all become kind of habit to just switch over. Don't worry about it, it'll feel weird for like the first collective hour of your driving. And you might sometimes get in the wrong side of the car for like a month or so. Not that I've ever done that, but don't worry about it. This is something that is a very big tip to Americans, because I've expressed this frustration to some other foreign friends and they were like, huh? That's legal in your country? That sounds incredibly dangerous. In Japan, if you're driving and you come upon a red light, you must stop. And you may not move your vehicle until the light turns green. Meaning, you cannot turn on a red light. Even turning to a close turn, which here would be like left, you can't turn on a red light. It is totally and completely illegal 100% of the time. In the US, if you're planning on turning right, you roll up to a red light, you can just like stop, look, go. But in Japan, don't do that, because if there's a cop around, you will get a ticket. Now I say if there's a cop around because red light cameras are not really a thing here, which is both a good thing and a bad thing, depending on what kind of a driver you are. It's a good thing because if the light is yellow and you like just ride the tail end and you don't quite make it, it's unlikely that someone will catch you unless there's a cop around. It's a bad thing because everybody's doing that, so sometimes when you are like starting to go from a green, you gotta like look and see if anybody's riding the end of that red light, because people will just blow through them. There's also a habit I've noticed in Japan of people like not knowing what to do at a stop sign. Say you're coming upon an intersection and you come up to it and so does somebody else and they stop before you, and so you stop. This happened to me yesterday, by the way. So the other guy was there first, so then he goes, and I'm like, okay, so now that I've stopped, I can go. However, there is somebody behind him who is just like, oh, the guy in front of me stopped, so I can go. And then you almost like crash into each other because I'm trying to turn and they're like going straight, and people like to piggyback through stop signs. So just be very vigilant driving, as you would be in any country. Speed limits in Japan are incredibly low. On the highway, the speed limit is usually about 60 kilometers an hour, which is 37 miles an hour on like major roads. If you're on the toll road, it's closer to like 80 kilometers an hour, which is about 50. So that doesn't mean that people drive slowly, it just means that everybody's speeding all the time. Another issue you might run into is people turning and going into the oncoming lane. The roads in Japan are very, very narrow. So if you're coming up to a stop and there's a turn lane, if you're going straight, the line to stop at will be much higher up than if you're turning, because when a car turns into your lane, he's probably gonna come in and like get into this oncoming lane for a second before scooting over and like going the proper direction, just because the roads are too narrow for them to like make a proper wide turn. You'll often come upon a road which looks wide enough for about 1.5 cars. And so you think to yourself, logically, this must be a one-way street. I wonder if it's the way that I'm going. I don't see any signs saying do not enter, therefore I must be allowed to go. And you start driving down the street, and lo and behold, there's another car driving at you. Why? Because it is a two-way street. So you'll often have to like do-si-do around other cars at like 0.5 kilometer an hour and like awkwardly like sucking your gut and like squeeze past each other. So if you have a habit of driving really quickly down roads, slow your roll if it's narrow, because someone will come whipping around the corner and almost murder your face. On most curves that are like blind curves, they'll put this like orange post thing with a mirror on it. Every once in a while, there'll be an intersection where you're like, I can see nothing. There is no mirror. Let's see what happens. So there's a lot of like small stresses if you're driving in the countryside due to like lack of space. If you're driving in the city, there's stresses with way too many people absolutely everywhere driving like maniacs. If you're in a big city, it'll probably be a nightmare. But like, if you've ever driven before, it's definitely one that you can manage. This is something that is very, very, very important. There is absolutely no alcohol allowed in your body at any time if you are behind the wheel of a moving vehicle. This means if you're driving a car or riding a bicycle counts as a vehicle. If you have even one drink of alcohol in you and you get pulled over, you are in serious trouble. I've heard stories of foreigners being like jailed and deported for having any alcohol in their system when they're driving. Just don't do it, kids. Don't do it. It's not worth it. So that includes if you take cough syrup that has codeine in it or something like that, it can show up as alcohol. So just be very careful, be aware of that. I'm not saying if you're sick, like don't drive. If you have the option to not drive, then don't. But like if you have to go to work, go to work. Like in the US, you can go out, have a beer or two with dinner, take some time, get in your car, drive home, no big deal. Japan, you do that, you get caught, you're fucked. So don't do it. It's just not worth it. As an American, if I see a police car that has its lights on, I immediately go into like panic mode because I'm kind of afraid of American police, as most Americans are. But in Japan, if a cop car has its lights on but no siren, it just means that they're on duty. If you see a car and it's driving around and it's got the red lights flashing, don't worry. It doesn't mean that you're being pulled over. My first couple of months, I did not know this. So if I had a cop car behind me and it had its lights on, I would pull over like, what did I do wrong, officer? Do you want to see my IDP? And then the cop car would just mosey on by and I'd just be like, okay. If you see a cop car with its lights on, act natural, just go about your life. They're not pulling you over. If they are pulling you over, they will also turn on their siren. So if you hear a siren, that means that they're like in the process of getting somebody. The Japanese police are actually like very non-threatening. Even in the cases where it's like, oh, we have to go deal with your ticket for 3 hours. They're nice about it. They're always like apologizing. I had a friend who got a speeding ticket and they like took them to the station and we were planning on going snowboarding that day and it was like getting later and later and later in the day and the cops kept apologizing. They were like, oh, I'm so sorry. Are you going to be late for your snowboarding? I'm so sorry that we are inconveniencing you with our stopping you from committing crime. Usually the cops are like very non-threatening. It's just like scary to be in any situation where you have to A, use a lot of Japanese and B, interact with authority figures. So on that note about sirens, the sirens are a lot quieter here. When an ambulance is like coming down the road, it's like very polite about it. I don't know. They have this soft, cute little Japanese voice that's like, excuse me, please move out of the way. If you don't mind, maybe I'm on my way to the hospital. If you don't mind maybe pulling over, that'd be super great. So if you have like your music blasting, you might not hear the ambulance coming until it's like 2 cars back and have to scooch out of the way, which can be difficult if you're on a really narrow road, especially if you're on a road that has no barriers on the side. This happened to me once. I was driving down a country road, so on one side there's a river, and on the other side there's farms down in a valley. So you're like probably 50 feet up, and on either side of the road is just like sheer kind of like, there's like a small gradual kind of gradient, but it's for the most part just like falling to your death if you go off the side of the road, and there's no barriers to stop you from doing so, so you just have to be like careful. And it's 1 lane of traffic each direction. So I was driving down this and a fire truck had to pass me, so I tried to like scoot over like as far as possible, and I swear to God, one of my wheels like dipped off the side and I had a heart attack in the car, and then I died, and then I came back to life from just like sheer stress adrenaline bringing back my soul from the other side. It was the most terrifying experience I have ever had in my life. But yeah, so there's a lot of like grip the wheel, suck in your gut driving in Japan because the roads are so narrow out in the countryside. You will get used to it, but at first you may or may not pee yourself with fear. Another thing is weird rules about when you can and cannot drive on certain roads. Sometimes if you're driving in like a city, you'll see roads that are one way for like a certain portion of the day. So this is supposed to like help with traffic flow or like reduce congestion or something. But if a road is like that, there'll be a sign. So like keep your eyes open for signs because they're often very small and just like over on the side, and if you miss them and you're like driving in the wrong place, you could get pulled over and it could be a problem. Or you could just look like an idiot gaijin smashing your way through a one-way street. Not that I've ever done that before, of course. So some roads are one way at certain times of the day and two-way at other times of the day. There are also special roads around schools where you're not allowed to drive at certain times in the morning. One of the schools that I visit on Thursdays, it has a road like this. It leads up to an elementary school, and because there's a lot of foot traffic of like little kids, you're not allowed to drive on that road from like 7:30 until 8:15 in the morning. I've heard that you can get special permits to be able to drive on roads like that. The purpose is to reduce the flow of traffic on that road so that they can reduce the likelihood of children being squished by motor vehicles. But I don't really worry about that because I don't have to be at that school until 8:40, so I'm usually not driving down that road until it's like 8:20 or 8:30 after the time that you're banned from being there, so it's not really a problem. Something that I absolutely love about Japan is the parking. And I say that both sarcastically and sincerely. The sarcastic thing that I love about parking in Japan is how narrow all the parking lots are. It's just a treat, let me tell you. There are two ways of parking your vehicle. The first is what I call the gaijin park, which most people have a habit of doing, at least in the US, which is you're driving your car and you go nose first into your parking spot, and then you turn your car off, go do your whatever, and when you leave, you back out and drive off. The Japan style parking, or the Nihonjin park, is to enter the parking lot and go past the spot that you want to go in and back up into it, so that when you leave, you can just like drive out. I think the idea behind it is that it's easier to leave the parking spot because there's a lot less space to maneuver between aisles. Like there's enough space for your car, but it just feels a little bit like claustrophobic. So sometimes people will give you like funny looks if you park the wrong way, or if you're in a major parking structure and you're like, oh, I have to back out of my space now, cars will be like, what are you doing? And they won't like give you enough room because they don't realize, like, I don't know why, honestly, because it should be pretty freaking obvious that like if you're backing out of a parking spot, you're going to need to fully back out in order to drive away. But like people will just creep up on you and it's like, dude, space. Space. So that's the thing that I don't like about parking in Japan. The thing that I love about parking in Japan is if you enter a parking lot and all of the parking spaces are full, you make your own parking spot. There is an unwritten rule here that's just like culturally accepted that you can park your car anywhere you want as long as it's not in the way. At one of my schools, there are like 40 teachers and like 25 parking spots. So the parking lot is just like this Tetris kind of like jigsaw. Cars are just like parked in random places. But as long as all of those cars can still like get out and go at the end of the day without anyone having to move their car, it doesn't matter. I've seen this at convenience stores. I've seen this at shops, restaurants, just like on the street. People will like curb hop to like go into a shop. One thing to note is that street parking is not really a thing here. The roads are usually just barely wide enough for two cars to pass each other without murdering a pedestrian on one side. So there's hardly ever a place that you're allowed to park your car long term on the side of a road. You can like stop your car and like leave it running and like run out and do your business and get back in and run off if you're quick about it. Another note about leaving your car running is people do that here often. If you go to the convenience store in the morning, afternoon, night, any time of day really, you'll often see like 4 or 5 cars just idling in the parking lot because no one's going to take them. I don't know, there's like so little crime here. It's amazing. The stuff that people do, the stuff that they just leave lying around, like it baffles my mind. So people will leave their cars running when they go into the convenience store for their coffee or their lunch or whatever. I've actually tried it a few times in the winter when it was freezing, just so I could keep my car warm when I went in, and it was so helpful. Like, I understand, and like, I'm gonna miss that so much when I go back to the US, because you do that shit in the United States of America and like, you're coming back outside and your car is gone. But people will like leave their purses in their car and just like take some money and go in and get their coffee and come back, and everything's fine, because this is Japan and people are slightly less dickish over here about that kind of thing. And one final note about driving is mainly for people who are driving in the countryside or in the Inaka. You will probably meet some friends on the road, and by that I mean you will probably meet some wild animals. The people in my town, we've reported sightings of foxes, cats, tanuki, wild boars, monkeys, deer, snakes, just like all kinds of animals running around, because Japan is like very aggressively in nature. There are animals everywhere. But don't be surprised if you're winding your way down one of those really, really narrow roads that's supposedly a two-way but only big enough for one car, and you've got a cliff up on one side and a cliff down on the other, and you're just like praying that nobody comes the other direction, because if you do, then somebody's gonna have to back up because there isn't actually space to go around each other. And you turn the corner and there is a wild boar or 3 little monkeys swinging across your path. It's pretty common, so just be aware of that, and try not to look too closely at any of the roadkill, because it can be pretty, yeah. So hopefully this has been informative for some people. It helps you get an idea of like what to expect. Of course, every situation is different, so it's possible that this will be utterly unhelpful, or you'll get here and you'll be like, you have no idea what you're talking about, you idiot. Everything is the opposite of whatever it is that you said. But hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully if you were feeling nervous, you now feel less nervous. Hopefully if you didn't feel nervous, I haven't made you feel nervous. If I did, sorry. The last thing that I want to leave you with is it's not actually all that difficult. People say, oh my god, driving in Japan, this and this and this and this and this you have to watch out for, this and this and this and this and this is really difficult. And even in this video, I've pretty much only covered all the stuff that it's like, be wary of this thing. But that's because I figure, like, you know how to drive. The point of this was just to make you aware of some of the stuff that might be different in Japan from particularly the US, but from wherever you're from. It's not as difficult as people try to make it seem. So don't worry about it. You will get used to all of the weird crap that you have to handle driving in Japan, just like you're used to all the weird crap that you have to handle driving in your home country. Anyways, it's now, God, I've been talking for like forever. It's like 7:30, so I still have a ridiculous amount of time before I have to leave for work. Why did I get up so early? The world may never know. So if you're planning to start driving in Japan soon, good luck. You can do it. Don't forget your IDP. It is very, very important. And I will see you next time. Bye!